Good evening everyone. So today we will discuss about the topic volume of distribution. So volume of distribution, it is the volume available for distribution of drugs. So distribution is the movement of drug from systemic circulation throughout the blood to body fluids to different organs and to barriers like blood-brain barrier and placental barrier. So the volume required for the drug for distribution purpose is known as volume of distributions. So there are two different volume of distribution. One is apparent volume of distribution and another is actual or real volume of distribution. What is apparent volume of distribution? So the amount of drug that is administered, which is symbolized as X, is directly proportional to the plasma drug concentration. X is the amount of drug administered. Amount, the unit of amount is in mg. How much amount of drug or the dose is administered is directly proportional to the concentration of drug that is present in plasma. It may be either milligram per ml or microgram per ml or even nanogram per ml. So how much dose you are administering? If the dose is higher, concentration present in plasma will also be higher. If the dose is lower, then the concentration present in the plasma is also lower. So the amount is proportional to concentration, which can be symbolized like X is proportional to C. So when you equate this proportionality, it includes a constant. Generally we use K. Here the proportionality constant Vd, that is apparent volume of distribution, is included. So the apparent volume of distribution is a proportionality constant relating the amount of drug with that of the plasma drug concentration. So the amount of drug which is administered to the plasma drug concentration and its ratio is known as the apparent volume of distribution, and the unit of apparent volume of distribution is ml. So apparent volume of distribution is different from the actual or real volume of distribution. Now what is actual or real volume of distribution? The actual or real volume of distribution depends upon the total body water. The total body water is the water content that is present in the body. So how much water content we have in our whole body? For on an average weight of a man is about 70 kg. So 70 kg is the average weight of a man. So for an average weight of a man, 60% of the average weight will be made of this body weight water. So the average weight of any man or woman, human, will have around 60% of water. We are composed of 60% of water and rest all the remaining 40%. So out of this 70 kg, the 60% will be of, that is about 42 liter is the volume of total body water. So total body water's volume is about 40 liter, and this total body water includes three other waters, which is vascular fluid, which is known as blood, extravascular fluid, other than vascular fluid, the other fluids, extracellular fluids and other fluids, and then we have ICF, intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid and the vascular fluids, are those fluids which are comprising into a total body water. So total body water again has three different fluids. One is blood, that is vascular fluid, and within the cells there are so many fluids which is intracellular fluid, and outside the cells there are some fluids which are extracellular fluids. Extra means outside cell, and inside cell is intracell, that is within cell. So intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid and vascular fluids will include the total body water. That is the water that is present in the whole body. So around 6 liter is the vascular fluid volume, and extracellular fluid is of about 15 liter. Rest all, that is 21 minus this 42 will be the intracellular fluid. So we have total of about 42 liters of total body water, and the actual volume of distribution or the real volume of distribution depends upon this 42 liter of the body water. How it is? So if the drug which permeates through the membrane and it can easily accessible throughout the blood, then the drug will have volume of distribution of about 6 liter if the drug can permeate through cell membrane, and if it doesn't permeate through the RBCs, they will have volume of distribution of about 3 liter, which is being explained by this actual volume of distribution. Now we have mentioned 42 liter is the total body water volume, and then 6 liter of blood which has 3 liter of plasma. Apart from that, another 15 liter will be made of this extracellular fluid. How this has been determined? So some markers, biological markers have been used to determine these volumes. So which markers can be used? Evans blue can penetrate through the blood and can be easily accessible. So this is used to determine the vascular fluid. So the blood volume can be determined by this dye Evans blue. Then extracellular fluid can be determined by using some ions like bromide and chloride ions. These bromide and chloride ions can permeate throughout the body, can be accessible throughout the body, but it cannot cross through the barrier, biological barrier, or through the cell membrane. Why? Because they are ionized substance. Ionized substance have limitation in permeation through the cell membrane. So they will be restricted to the extracellular environment. So the extracellular fluid can be determined by this chloride ions and bromide ions. They will be confined only to the extracellular fluid. So they can be used to determine the extracellular fluids volume. And lastly, the substances which are highly lipophilic in nature and less protein bound or negligible protein bound, without protein bound, the drug which will not have any protein binding, the drug which is devoid of protein binding, that is no protein binding, and the drug which is lipophilic, can permeate through the membrane, can be accessible throughout. Since it is not protein bound, it can even have glomerular filtration and it can enter into any membranes. So it can pass throughout the body very freely and are accessible throughout the body very freely. It can cross the blood-brain barrier. So the total body water can be determined by using such substance. One example is antipyrine. So antipyrine is used to determine the total body water. This total body water can be determined, that is of 42 liter total body water was determined by using this substance antipyrine. Why this substance is used? Because this substance is highly lipophilic in nature and it doesn't have any protein binding. So we have discussed about this two volume of distribution. One is apparent volume of distribution and another is actual volume of distribution. Apparent volume of distribution is the ratio of amount of drug administered to the body to the plasma drug concentration, and the unit of this volume of distribution is ml. Whereas actual and real volume of distribution depends upon the total body water. This apparent volume of distribution may have the volume of distribution larger than the actual volume or sometimes lesser than the actual volume, but actual or real volume of distribution's value will be limited up to 40 liter. It cannot go beyond 42 liter, but the value of this VD, that is apparent volume of distribution, can go beyond the 42 liters also. Say for example, if the drug is administered is of 10 mg and the concentration at the time present is 0.1 per ml, then the concentration will be of 100 ml, or if it is a liter, then it will be of 100 liter. 100 liter which is greater than that of 42 liter, which is above the actual volume of distribution. This is an example for apparent volume of distribution. This apparent volume of distribution is not related to any total body water. It is merely the ratio or the proportionality constant that is relating the amount of drug administered to the plasma drug concentration. So we have apparent volume of distribution and the another one is real or actual volume of distribution. Now, what is the relationship between this apparent volume of distribution and real volume of distribution? That is, when we have protein binding of drugs, if we have plasma protein binding of drugs, there may be possibility the drug can bind either with protein or with tissues. So there are two binding possibilities of drug. One is plasma protein binding, another is tissue binding. So when we have protein binding, that is plasma protein binding, the drug is confined to plasma. So the drug will be always present in plasma. The drug movement into different organs like heart or liver or kidney will be restricted in case of the drug which have protein binding, because it cannot permeate through the cells. So the drug will be confined only to the plasma. So the drug which moves to tissues or to organs will have large volume of distribution, but because the drug is in bound form, it cannot distribute to the tissues. Such drug will have small volume of distribution. That is, apparent volume of distribution will be less than that of actual or real volume of distribution. Why they have small VD? Because the drug is not distributed to the tissues. Why they haven't distributed to the tissues? Because inside plasma, proteins present bound the drugs and restrict their movement to the different tissues. So the drug is in plasma, it is not distributed to tissue. So distribution is not done, so the volume of distribution is small VD drugs. That means apparent volume of distribution is less than this actual volume of distribution. In the reverse case, in case of tissue binding, when there are tissue binding, when the tissue binding of drugs takes place, when the drug enters from the blood to the organs, when it enters the different tissues, the drug has been distributed more. Then only once it enters the tissues, the drug will bind with the tissue. That is tissue binding. So now the drugs have been distributed already. So the drug will have large VD. Now the drug is not in blood, it has been distributed to tissues. That is where tissue binding took place. So when tissue binding of drugs takes place, the volume of distribution of such drugs will have large VD. That means the apparent volume of distribution will be greater, that is large, than that of actual or real volume of distribution, which is VR. So VD will be less than VR, that is VR, that is small VD if there will be protein binding, but VD will be greater than that of VR, that is large VD in case of tissue binding. So when there will be protein binding of drugs, the relationship between this apparent and actual volume of distribution is because of the binding of drugs, either in plasma protein or in tissue. If the drug is plasma protein bound, they don't enter into tissues, so there is no distribution, so the VD will be small. That means apparent volume of distribution is less than actual volume of distribution. Whereas if the drugs permeates more through the tissues and enters the tissues, their tissue binding takes place. Means the drug is less in plasma, more in tissue. That means they have large volume of distribution, that is apparent volume of distribution is greater than that of the actual volume of distribution. This is the relationship between actual and apparent volume of distribution. So this is all about volume of distribution. So volume of distribution, if it is once it is confined only to plasma, that is for a small VD drugs, the half-life will be more. The drug will be continuously circulating in the body, so it will have longer half-life. Since it is protein bound, it cannot permeate through the glomerular filtration and cannot be excreted, as well as it cannot be metabolized, so they cannot be eliminated out from the body. So protein bound drugs will have more half-life. So this is all about volume of distribution. This question may come in 5 marks and in some objectives. Like in competitive exams, when the volume of distribution may be small or when the volume of distribution may be large. So it may be asked like this: protein binding leads to dash volume of distribution, that is small volume of distribution, that is apparent volume of distribution less than actual volume of distribution. There the actual volume of distribution will be more but apparent will be less. Whereas in case of drug which will have tissue binding, there the apparent volume of distribution will be more, that is large volume of distribution, than that of actual or real volume of distribution. This is all about volume of distribution. So it can come in short notes or some objective type questions in competitive exams will be there. Thank you. We'll discuss about the protein binding of drugs in my next